I'd like to call the City Commission meeting of Monday, October 8th to order and ask those who wish to join me in standing and saying the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Clerk, has the roll been taken this evening?
It has. All are present tonight.
Wonderful. Under proclamations and presentations this evening, we have one item on the agenda, and if the other commissioners don't mind, I would like to add a second proclamation recognizing the Bowlers Hall of Fame Day. That's all right with everyone? All right. So I will go to the podium right now and do the proclamation recognizing today is Indigenous Peoples Day. And so any members who are here that would like to join me in that, I would love to award this proclamation. All right, I am excited. This is probably one of my favorite nights of the year for commission meetings because we get to open with such a great proclamation, and we have such wonderful guests here to share their culture with us. So today is Indigenous Peoples Day. Oh, did I leave that proclamation behind? It states that whereas in 2010, the state of Michigan, the county of Isabella, and the city of Mount Pleasant recognized the official boundaries of the Isabella Indian Reservation through a historic set of agreements, and whereas these historic agreements amicably settled long-standing Indian country jurisdictional issues and are now considered model agreements for the rest of the country, and whereas the city of Mount Pleasant desires to demonstrate and celebrate its strong and productive relationship with the Saginaw Chippewa Tribal Council based on mutual respect and trust, and whereas the idea of Indigenous Peoples Day was first proposed in 1977 by a delegation of Native nations to the United Nations-sponsored International Conference on Discrimination Against Indigenous Populations in the Americas, and whereas Indigenous Peoples Day is an opportunity to educate about pre-existing Indian cultures that have survived an often violent colonization process and continue to exist and thrive in present-day America. Now, therefore, I, Allison Quast Lentz, Mayor of the City of Mount Pleasant, do hereby proclaim the second Monday in October Indigenous Peoples Day. And further, the city supports that Indigenous Peoples Day be used to reflect upon those ongoing struggles of Indigenous people in this land and to continue to celebrate the thriving culture and value that the Saginaw Chippewa and other Indigenous peoples add to our city and community. And further, that the City of Mount Pleasant City Commission recognizes the value of working collaboratively together with the Saginaw Chippewa Tribal Council and look forward to addressing areas of mutual concern in our community. Well, thank you so much. We really appreciate the partnership that we have, and I am really happy that you're a part of our community. So, thank you.
Hi. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Craig Gray-Rett, Executive Council Member, Treasurer for the Saginaw Chippewa Indian Tribe. It's a great honor to be here tonight in front of you guys to accept this proclamation and to work together with the City of Mount Pleasant. Thank you.
And I believe we have, oh, Joey's got a microphone next to him. We want to explain what we're going to do, and then before we start, if I could ask everyone to rise in listening to the drum circle this evening.
You can either come up here with the microphone or use the one next to you, whatever you're comfortable with, Joe.
Bonjour. Hello. Emik Minawa Neo Benesse Wagni Dijna Cause, Bachuana Donjaba Saginaw Chippewa and Dida, Hachichak to them. I just want to say good evening to each and every one of you. My name is Joe Surratt. I'm a language and cultural teacher at the Saginaw Chippewa Academy. I just wanted to make mention of some of the things that have been brought to my attention. I'm not sure if a lot of you council members or dignitaries here that are aware of the social standards that are happening. There's changes that's been happening in the social standards for classes, history, books, and schools. I just want to read off of some of the things that have been mentioned, key points to help guide comments in the Michigan Social Studies Standards proposed updates. This one part says the 2018 draft version omitted mention of American Indians, Latinos as new immigrants, people with disabilities, and gays and lesbians of other members of the LGBT community, and replaced this language with American minorities. Another one is the standards as amended completely erase indigenous history of the state. The Treaty of Washington with the Ottawa and Chippewa in 1836 negotiated a massive land cession accounting for 40% of Michigan's land base and allowed for Michigan to become a state. So I was told that there's been this committee that's been going around to different towns and asking for input on the history of Native Americans. And one of the things that I wanted to make mention was to never forget. And again, I know that changes are happening, and we're very appreciative and grateful for the things that are happening as for today, to acknowledge this day as Indigenous Day rather than Columbus. A lot of our people are suffering from historical trauma, and you know, we're seeing ourselves getting past that by practicing our traditional ways and learning our traditional language. So I just wanted to make mention to that. You know, I'm not trying to stir the pot, but you know, we're here today to sing. We got asked to come and sing for you. And this drum, we call it Mishomistewegan. It's referred to as our grandfather drum. A lot of our people know it as the heartbeat of our nation. So when we ask people to stand, it's in honor of the drum, but also for what you guys are all, everyone here is doing today. So in our ways, as Anishinaabe, as Ojibwe or Odawa or Chippewa, Ojibwe, Dawa, or Potawatomi people, you know, for us, the drum has united a lot of our people together, and also like what's going on here tonight. So we want to say Chimigwech to for all of you to ask for us to come and sing and to share just a little bit of who we are as Native people. So the song that we're going to share, it's basically known as an honor song. So we'll keep it short and sweet. So again, Chimigwech Gibizin Damok. Thank you for listening, and again, thank you for what you guys are deciding and implementing here today. So, Miigwech.
Miigwech, Joe. In the name of the drum group today, they have the Onion Creek drum with them, so I'll turn it over to you guys. Miigwech.
Hey!
Somebody's phone.
I think it says.
Thank you.
Thank you all. It's really, I think, a wonderful part of our community that we have such a great cultural history, and really appreciate that the Saginaw Chippewa tribe shares that with us. So the next thing that we have on our agenda is a proclamation regarding the Mount Pleasant Bowlers Hall of Fame. And I believe Jerry is here, as the president of the organization. Again, another thing that makes our community great is having civic organizations that help bring communities together. And the Bowlers Hall of Fame has been long-standing in our community.
This is our 35th year.
Congratulations. So the proclamation reads, whereas the Mount Pleasant Bowlers Hall of Fame was credited in 1984 to honor those persons, bowlers, proprietors, and sponsors who have contributed to the game of bowling, and whereas candidates for this honor may be bowlers, proprietors, or sponsors, and have been members of either the Mount Pleasant Women's Bowling Association, or the Mount Pleasant Men's Bowling Association, or the Mount Pleasant USBC, and have individually performed through bowling ability, promotion, and other outstanding acts for 15 years or more. And whereas selections for induction into the Hall of Fame are made on the basis of character, sportsmanship, personality, leadership, dedication, and achievement. Now therefore, I, Allison Quast-Lentz, Mayor of the City of Mount Pleasant, do hereby proclaim October 14th, 2018 as Bowlers Hall of Fame Day in Mount Pleasant, and extend congratulations to the newest members of the Mount Pleasant Bowlers Hall of Fame. Do they know who they are yet? So I can
yes,
read
there's
it out
actually
loud? Yeah.
one missing on there.
Oh, no, uh-oh. So I have Jason Embry, Sean Embry, Karen, you're gonna have to help me with that pronunciation. Nagana,
And Scott Emery.
and Scott Emery. All three of them, huh?
Yes.
Oh,
it's
wow, it's a
family.
whole family.
Yep.
Wonderful. Well, I know that we have at least one of our commission members will be in attendance of
Oh,
your
good.
event
And they
to
can
read
bring a
this
guest, too,
proclamation.
also.
And we really appreciate you being a part of our community,
Yes.
so thank you.
Appreciate you doing this.
Yeah.
Thank you.
If you have any other words, you're welcome to.
No, thank you very much. It's a great honor for our organization to honor up to 4 candidates a year, and it's our 35th year. If you go out to Riverwood Bowling Center, all the pictures are on the wall. It's a pretty good spectrum of different people that are in the bowling sport.
Wonderful.
Cool.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Yes. Sometimes I think we should do the proclamation and presentations at the end because it's the most fun. All right. Any additions or deletions to the agenda? Additional deletion, okay, staff is good. All right, so next we have public input on agenda items. This is the opportunity for anyone in the audience to come forward and give any public input on any agenda items. There are 2 public hearings this evening, one on Chapter 30 of the Mount Pleasant City Code, and the second is on considering snow and ice removal on city sidewalks. And we also have an opportunity at the end of the agenda for public comment on any city-related issue, whether it's on the agenda or not. We welcome you up to the podium to speak and ask that you limit your comments to 5 minutes and state your name and address when you begin. We'll open the public hearing now. Public comment. All right. Seeing nobody here for the general public comment, I will close this portion of the meeting and ask the city manager to go through the receipt of petitions and communications.
Tonight, this evening, you have the report on pending items, the July minutes of the Parks and Recreation Commission, the April minutes of the Zoning Board of Appeals, the August minutes of the Tax Increment Finance Authority and Principal Shopping District, and then you have receipt of the Michigan Municipal League core legislative principles for the upcoming year and the receipt of their annual State of the League that we received at the conference 2 weeks ago. You also have correspondence received from the CEO of McLaren Central Michigan regarding Maple Street, and we will reach out to Mr. Chersky and set up the meeting with him that he requested. Then you have 2 correspondence that were received regarding your sidewalk snow removal. One was from Wendy Lemke of 323 South Kinney. The other one in the packet was from Mr. Mark Franzik, who's a resident of Mount Pleasant. And then on the dais tonight, you had 4 that came in either over the weekend or today. And those 4 communications are from Nancy Cantrell of 432 South Fancher Street, Rose Gross of 1212 West Broadway, Sandra Standish, who indicated she's a resident of Mount Pleasant, and David McGuire, a resident of Mount Pleasant. So those are the 6 written communications you've received regarding the public hearing you have coming up on that matter.
Okay. Are there any comments or questions? Commissioner Joseph.
I just had a quick comment on the Parks and Rec Commission report. I noticed that we're putting out bids for the new amphitheater for Island Park, and I just wanted to highlight, I'm really excited about that project, so.
Thank you. City Manager, on the Maple Street project, the last meeting you identified that if we had commissioners who were concerned about that they should let you know. I'm assuming that still stands.
Right, we received a couple questions on it, which we responded to, but other than that, we continue to move forward with trying to look at if there's items we can do regarding the brick entranceways. And other than that, we continue to move forward with the traditional design at this point.
So I think it would take at least 4 commissioners to send you notification that they would like to talk about doing something different before we have a more conversation on that. So just so the other commissioners know. You don't have to do it this minute, but Commissioner Gillis is interested in more conversation. Okay. All right. So as you think about that project, are there any items that need to be taken off, removed from the consent calendar this evening? Seeing none, I'll ask the city manager to go through the consent calendar items, which are all the items that have an asterisk next to them on the agenda. We do this to go through the process a little bit faster and make votes on all those items as one lump sum.
We only have 3 items on the consent calendar for your consideration this evening. The first is the minutes of the regular meeting of September 24th, and we owe an apology to Commissioner Lalone. We spelled her name incorrectly twice in the minutes, so we have corrected that in the original minutes, which will be signed assuming you approve these. The second meeting is that we're asking, or the second item is we're asking you to consider setting a special meeting for Monday, October 29th at 7 p.m. so we could meet with the Student Government Association on CMU's campus. That meeting would take place in the Bovee University Center. And then the last item is approval of payrolls and warrants.
I see a motion from Commissioner Gillis, seconded by Commissioner Joseph. Any comments or questions this evening? Seeing none. Oh, Commissioner Joseph?
I just wanted to add that I'm also enthusiastic about the meeting that we're having with the Student Government Association on the 29th. I'm a former CMU student, formerly of the Student Government Association, and I think it's a great collaboration that we're going to be doing, and I think it really is something that emphasizes how important local government is, and our students in our community are a very important component, and anything that we can do together is just, I think, moving forward in the right direction. So.
Okay. Thank you. Seeing no other comments, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, we are now on to public hearings. So I'll ask the city manager to give us a little bit of information on item number 11 on the chapter 30 and 31 of the city code before we go into the public hearing.
Yes, these ordinance amendments are to update the rules of procedure, and most of these recommendations were recommended by the Charter Committee. The primary change in this section is to incorporate the ethics policy into the ordinance. The small change to Chapter 31 is recommended to reduce the confusion that exists regarding the due date of when petitions for city commission candidates are due. To make it real clear, we just follow state law for that. So we're recommending you hold the public hearing, and after holding the public hearing, we ask you to consider adopting either the version with the footnotes or without the footnotes to the ethics policy, whichever you're most comfortable with.
All right. Are there any questions on that item for the city manager before I open up for a public hearing? Okay, seeing no questions, I will open the public hearing on this item. Again, I ask that you come to the podium, limit your comments to 5 minutes, and state your name and address. Ethics policies are very exciting. Nobody here has any comments for us. I will close this portion of the public hearing and ask for a motion. I see a motion from Commissioner Kulik, seconded by Commissioner Joseph.
I'd like to make a point of order.
Yes.
Tony, is your motion to include the footnotes or to not include the footnotes?
To include the footnotes.
Okay. I second that.
Okay. Any comments or questions?
I'll make a quick comment. As part of the committee that brought this forward, most of the changes are just clerical in nature, just fixing up some wording. And I think it's a really good idea that staff brought to add the ethics policy to that. So that's about it.
Great. And the ethics policy, talks about when there are conflicts of interest and how you go about deciding those, and has been a policy that we've had now for quite some time. And Commissioner Ling regularly goes over that policy with all of the new board members whenever she can, and I appreciate her work on that ethics policy.
Yeah, and as long as you mention that, I'll just mention that we have former Mayor Kilmer in the audience, and actually, he was the first person when he was running for office quite a long time ago who made that one of his platforms to have a code of ethics, so I have to share.
He's here for that historic occasion, huh?
Yeah.
We're adding it into the charter. All right. Seeing no other comments or questions, I don't know why I'm picking that up. I'm getting excited today. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed?
Aye.
Tony, that passes 6-1. Okay. And we are on to item number 12, the public hearing on the ordinance regarding snow and ice removal. I'll ask the city manager to give us a little bit of background.
Yes, you've had a number of work session discussions on this matter, and the ordinance before you this evening to obtain public input on would continue to require commercial and industrial properties to clear the snow from their sidewalks within 18 hours after the snowfall ends. The ordinance amendment does provide clarity on how properties are defined as far as residential, commercial, or industrial, and it refers to their classification from the General Property Tax Act. The new ordinance before you also provides a requirement that sidewalks in residential areas would be required to clear the snow within 48 hours after the snow ceases. It continues to give the ability for the issuance of a municipal civil infraction, or it also provides the ability for the city to clear the snow if someone is cited and add that as a tax lien as a bill to their tax lien. The ordinance does indicate that residential property enforcement would not begin until November 2019. And the intent of that was to give 1 year of educational enforcement before any enforcement action was truly taken. So that allows us the education, but it also allows a year to deal with issues that individuals were concerned about those who may be physically challenged to clear their sidewalks. During the work session, we discussed about having a rotating schedule for enforcement so that we would be able to enforce with our existing staff and see how that would work. So tonight, we're asking you to take comments on the proposed ordinance, and after you have those comments, you essentially have three options in front of you. You can approve the ordinance as presented. You can postpone decision on it until you have further discussion or have time to absorb the comments this evening, or you can take no action, which would leave the current ordinance in effect.
And I just want to let the commissioners know that when we were looking at the work session schedule, we did allow, we did find room to have further discussion if that is what the commission decides. So I tentatively have one scheduled, I believe it was actually on the 29th when we're at CMU.
Yes, that was our tentative schedule.
Yeah, that was our tentative schedule. So just so you know, we did take that into account, figuring that that would likely be what we would need to do with this. So with that, I will open the public hearing. Again, I ask you to come to the podium, state your name and address, and limit your comments to 5 minutes. I will hold up a 1-minute card when you have 1 minute left, and a out of time card when you are out of time. Mr. Kilmer.
Good evening. Bruce Kilmer, 415 North University. It's been a long time since I've been here. Glad to be here. I do appreciate all the work you do, and I do appreciate your wanting to have a walkable community, but I don't think this ordinance is the way to do it. I believe that city sidewalks are city sidewalks and not the responsibility of homeowners. Just like the streets are city streets, the right-of-way, these are your responsibility as the city commission. It's not like a lawn, which is maybe on our property as a homeowner. This is the street, the sidewalk, and the right-of-way. We can't do anything as homeowners. They're yours to take care of. I think this is a dangerous ordinance, and I think it's a nightmare to enforce. You've already said you can't really enforce it citywide. You have to rotate it. And I think there's a lot of homeowners that physically can't do it, and they can't afford to pay for somebody. And I think coming up with options for all of them, I've heard you talk about that, I think that's wishful thinking. There are hundreds of them, and I don't think you can come up for options of hundreds of people who can't afford it and who physically can't shovel their walks. Why I think it's dangerous, I think some people will want to obey the ordinance. They're law-abiding. They'll get out there and try to do it. They can't afford to hire anybody, and then they could injure themselves, or worse, they could have a heart attack. So I ask you not to adopt this ordinance. I think the city should come up with a responsibility, has the responsibility to come up with a solution without forcing the city sidewalks to be shoveled by homeowners. Also, the ordinance would discontinue the school routes. So that'll make it even more dangerous for the students, for those homeowners that can't shovel the school routes. So I urge you to take responsibility for it, not put it on the homeowners, and to not pass this ordinance, and thank you for listening.
Thank you.
My name is David McLeod. We live at 525 South Fancher, which is a corner lot, the corner of Fancher and Maple. And I'd like to comment somewhat factually as someone who shovels his walk by hand, and there's quite a bit of walk to shovel because it is a corner lot. And then secondly, make some comments as someone who actually walks quite a lot in the winter. So first, as regards the shoveling, the biggest single shoveling problem is created by the city plows. The barriers that they throw up, first on Fancher, it gets done first, and then a day or so later on Maple, are of a nature that they go about so high at times, and if you don't get out and shovel them within the first few hours, they freeze into something that you'd need a pickaxe to clear. The city does that, not the homeowner. And I suppose if you have a powerful enough machine, you can smash your way through it. I don't, I shovel by hand. A second problem with shoveling is that if the snow does come down wet and you happen to be out of town, even just for a day or two, it will freeze in place. And again, maybe if you have a powerful shoveling machine, you can handle it, but it becomes very difficult to do by hand. I'm 75, maybe I should give up and just hire somebody to shovel my walks, particularly because of the hazard that I might be out of town when there's a snowfall. Now, as the other side of the coin, as someone who walks, I do walk a lot. The biggest hazard when you're walking is, once again, that mound that the city plows create and do not clear. The mounds are especially hazardous if you're crossing a busy street like High, because if you climb up on the thing and then if you slipped climbing down and it's a busy street and you slip and fall and somebody doesn't notice and comes along with a car, you're in serious trouble. But in any case, the sidewalks will not be walkable if homeowners merely shovel their sidewalks and those curb barriers created by the city plows are not systematically and completely removed. Secondly, as a walker, I find that often the major hazards come from shoveled walks, not unshoveled ones. Unshoveled walks are usually pretty easy to walk on. You can't walk quite as fast. And I do appreciate the people who shovel their walks, as I do. But what happens when the walk has been shoveled is that in many cases, a puddle forms. The snow melts, it forms a deep puddle, and you will see that the actual track of the limited number of people who do walk along the sidewalks goes along the walk for a while and then detours out into the snow to get around the puddle, and then goes back onto the walk and then detours around the next puddle. The other problem is that when the snow melts and refreezes, it can form small ice patches. And the only time that I have ever sprained an ankle while walking in winter in Mount Pleasant was when I hit one of these refrozen ice patches. So there are some hazards created by shoveling your walk. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Michelle Busili. I live at 602 Hopkins in Mount Pleasant. And my first thoughts when I heard about the mandate were the elderly people in our community trying to shovel their walks, not being able to afford it. And then I started talking to my tenants who are gone for 4 weeks at Christmas and who are gone for a week at spring break. And I know that that may or may not, burden may or may not fall on them depending on the landlord's leases. Our leases require our tenants to shovel their sidewalks. We don't have a fine for that if they don't shovel them. But if they're gone, that burden's going to fall on me to do that. It's a financial burden if I have to hire somebody, or a personal burden if I have to do it myself. Or I tend to be out of town too when my tenants are out of town, because that's the only time I can take a vacation.
And so I have, 5 properties here in Mount Pleasant that I may not be able to keep up with this mandate during those holiday times that the students are gone. So I agree with some of the other people in the audience. I think that the city needs to reconsider and come up with another solution for sidewalks. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Commissioners. Petro Tolis, 306 East Broadway Street, Mount Pleasant. I have to correct one thing from the last meeting I was here. I thought we had 2 Unimog sidewalk vehicles, but I guess the city only has 1. I don't think the City Commission has really thought about this too much. I have to agree with Mr. Kilmer. Residents don't own their sidewalk. You're trying to enforce an ordinance on them to take care of city property and take on the city liability. Once you put residents to start cleaning the sidewalks, I guess you're going to transfer the liability to the residents. As I said before, a lot of people are handicapped, they're elderly, and they live on a fixed income. They don't have the money to go out and sub it out. And then you're talking enforcement would be a nightmare. We're going to pay city staff, 3 or 4 of them, to do code enforcement and write people tickets, and going to put them on the taxes and take their homes away for not shoveling their sidewalks. This is idiotic. You already have a Unimog machine that costs over $200,000. It just sits in a public works building and does nothing. You can take 1 personnel and put it in there. You're cutting staff downtown here to clean the downtown. And we went from 2 inches on every snowfall to 4 inches, and you raised every business person up there a 32% increase. To do what? I don't understand where we're spending more money. We're doing less work, and you have a 32% increase. I wouldn't mind taking part of that 32% and just hire somebody part-time to go in a Unimog and do it. Again, you need to vote this down because it's going to be challenged. And you have legal staff. Residents don't own the sidewalk. Also, I think you ought to be spending more time on these new businesses that are trying to come to Mount Pleasant here, like Hobby Lobby and Big Lot and the old Kmart. And from what I hear now, the city's telling them, oh, you got to tear the building down and build a new building in the middle of the parking lot, which doesn't make any sense at all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Martha Riggs, and I live at 600 East Gaylord. And my husband is great at shoveling our walkways. Again, we're on a corner lot, so we have 2 sides of it to do. But the times we have not cleared it have been because of surgery or illness or being out of town. And trying to find somebody to come and take care of the sidewalks when you're not in a company's regular schedule is sometimes pretty difficult to do. And so I would urge you not to support this. And I'd like to agree with Mr. McLeod. It's often much safer to have the traction of snow under your feet than the sidewalks that have been cleared, melted, and refrozen. Those are the times I slip. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else here? Oh, all right.
Good evening. My name is Larry Lemke. I live at 323 South Kinney. Like several of those who spoke before me, I live on a corner lot, which means I have twice as much snow to shovel as my neighbors. But I would like to speak in favor of this ordinance. I moved to Mount Pleasant in 2016 after having lived in Ann Arbor, Michigan for 20 years. And in Ann Arbor, they have a snow removal ordinance. there everyone is required to remove the snow from their walk within 24 hours of the end of a snowfall. And nobody bats an eyelash at that. It's totally accepted. It's part of the culture of a walkable, pedestrian-friendly city. And frankly, I'm very surprised that we don't have that here in Mount Pleasant. What we do have in Mount Pleasant, that we have in spades when we compare it to Ann Arbor, is a sense of community. I have been really impressed with the way that people have reached out to welcome me and help my family accomplish the things we needed to do as new residents. And I do hear the concerns that have been expressed about the need to care for sidewalks for families or individuals who may not be able to take care of them on their own. But it baffles me that we wouldn't have an attitude that we could help our neighbors out. People could chip in if someone is away, if someone is ill. If I have a neighbor like I do who is unable to remove her own snow, I shovel it for her. It just seems like the natural thing to do. I don't understand the arguments that say that this is going to be a legal problem, because there are many cities in the state who have an ordinance like this that it goes unchallenged and is very successful. I think 48 hours is in fact very generous. What I would urge you to do is to consider the rules that you're putting into play and what it means to actually clear your sidewalk. In Ann Arbor, the rule was you had to have it down to bare pavement to avoid the kinds of things that we were talking about earlier with puddles and freezing and that sort of thing. And it's never going to be possible to have a perfectly cleared sidewalk. But what we're talking about here are major snowfalls when, if we leave the snow on the sidewalks, it gets trampled down and eventually does turn to ice. And that ice is a hazard. It's a risk balance decision that we're asking you to make, because there are pros and cons and there are no perfect solutions here. But I think this ordinance would be a step in the right direction that would help our community move toward a walkable, pedestrian-friendly mindset and build a lasting culture of the kind of city that I would like to see Mount Pleasant become, and enhance our community's ability to work together to do something simple like keep our sidewalks clean for those who walk, because we really need a place to walk safely. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else here this evening who would like to speak on this item? Yes, sir.
I just use about 15 seconds to say the problem with the puddles is the sidewalks are very irregular. Many of them are lower than the surrounding lawn. And even though you shoveled bare cement, bare concrete, the puddles form. It doesn't do it much on our particular corner because we have relatively new sidewalks. But a lot of other places, the sidewalks are lower than the surrounding lawn.
Thank you. For those at home that didn't hear that, he was mentioning the problem with the puddles on older sidewalks. They tend to be lower than the lawn, and so the snow melts onto the sidewalk instead of dripping off of the sidewalk into the lawn. Seeing no other comments, I will close this portion of the meeting and turn to the commission for a vote. Commissioner Ling, or a motion. Commissioner Lang? Yes, we do need emotions.
Of the three options, the second option was to postpone, and I would like to make a motion that we postpone a decision on this until we've had an additional work session.
Okay, seconded by Commissioner Joseph. Any, Commissioner Ling?
And I'd like to just briefly say, I really appreciate, this has been a very thoughtful and civil discussion, which is a breath of fresh air sometimes compared to things that sometimes happen. I think some very good points have been raised. I have to admit, I was reading something, I get online, you know, these inspirational readings to make you a better person, and the other day one said, 2 of the key things you need to think about are honesty and humility. And I have to honestly say, I need to be a little humble about how difficult this is, because I have been a person that for a long time has said, we should just pass an ordinance and have people shovel their walks. And I think there's a lot to be said for that, but it is a complicated issue. And I think some issues that have been raised are things we need to look at, and that's why I'm suggesting that we postpone it.
Okay, Commissioner Kulik.
I've been opposed to this snow shoveling idea from the beginning. For a variety of reasons. One is in the wintertime, if you're dressed appropriately, you wear reflective clothing, you're not dressed like a ninja, it's safe to walk in the street. If it's not safe to walk in the street, I would agree, it's not safe to walk on High Street or along Mission Street. Some other suggestions. What if the city just plowed the sidewalks on all streets that have a posted speed above 25 miles an hour? And every place else tell people to walk in the street. Walk facing traffic, wear reflective clothing, you'll be fine. Or I keep hearing, this is just like grass. We have to mow grass? Fine. Let's not have to shovel snow until it gets 9 inches tall. That's the standard for mowing your lawn. And I believe it might even be possible that if 25 miles per hour is an unsafe speed, maybe we could reduce the speed citywide on all non-posted streets to 20 miles an hour or 15 miles an hour to increase the safety and let people walk in the streets. We plow the streets, we sand the streets, we salt the streets, walk in the streets.
Yeah. Thank you. Are there other comments or questions this evening? Commissioner Gillis.
I just want to clarify or remind the rest of the commission. We put the bid out, and the bid for snow removal was 4 inches or more, correct? Mm-hmm. But yet the ordinance is now written that homeowners have to clear it even if it's a dusting. And Mr. Tolis said something about downtown. Have they changed their regulation where they clear the sidewalks if it's 4 inches now?
It's in the parking lots, I believe.
The only sidewalks that the city clears downtown are, we have a contract for someone to clear the sidewalks that are around the city-owned parking lots, and that hasn't changed. They clear those each snowfall. The 4 inches applies more so to when we call plows out on overtime, and that applies to both the streets and the parking lots.
So you wait till it's 4 inches or more, or you explain that again. So the parking lots are cleared only when it's 4 inches or more?
Certainly on overtime. We don't call anybody in on overtime unless it's more than 4 inches. When it's during the regular workday, we use judgment based on how the snow's falling and what the predictions are as far as when the plows go out.
So if there's a dusting on the parking lots downtown, you might not send the city might not go out and clear the parking lots?
Correct.
But okay. You may run the salt truck through there and not plow.
Correct.
Okay. Well, I have trouble with the differentiation of our parking lots downtown not being cleared if it's a dusting, because it might not be felt that it's needed. And I think that also can apply to homeowners' sidewalks in front of their houses. I also agree that the sidewalks are the city's responsibility. The city chose to put sidewalks in front of people's homes, so they maintain the safety of the sidewalks when they're heaved or they need to be ground down or redone. So I do believe we could find it in our budget and finance the city staff and accommodate purchasing new equipment to do the sidewalks. We may have to start at only 30 miles. We have so far 44 miles in the CD3 and the CD3L areas that have sidewalks. So, and the businesses are already required to do that. So I think for a compromise, we could look into starting off with what we used to do, which was about 24, 25 miles of school walking routes and other sidewalks. And then we had a really bad winter. I think it was like in 2014, Ms. Ridley, you might remember exactly when it was, when the city staff had decided to cut back to only 14 miles because of the cost that winter of clearing the 25 miles that we used to do. So I figure if we could just find a few more dollars and we could clear 44 miles or maybe even start at 30 miles of sidewalks, making some major school routes and major routes east and west and north and south, so people, pedestrians that are walking in the winter would know, hey, along High Street, along Broadway, along Mosier, I know those sidewalks are going to be clear because those are the ones that the city does. I think most neighbors go out and do sidewalk clearing for maybe exercise. They want their sidewalks clear, but I don't think that's a responsibility of a homeowner. I do believe that falls on the city because the city chose to put that sidewalk there. I'm not sure, but I don't know of anyone that came to the city commission and said, I really want a sidewalk in front of my house. I really want a sidewalk. So, and also my concerns are the big piles that do end up on the corners after the plow goes through. Somebody may leave in the morning, they have gone out the night before and shoveled their sidewalk, they go to work, they might get off at 5, they might get off at 7, they might get off at 9 o'clock at night because they work overtime. I don't expect that homeowner to go back out, clear the part of the sidewalk they already did because the city plows went through. And just like some of the speakers had already mentioned, that snow is much heavier than just fallen snow. That's packed. I'm not able to move that myself when I'm clearing it out of my driveway. I don't have a sidewalk in front of my house, so this doesn't affect me personally, but I know many people in the community have reached out to me. We've had several letters. The majority of them are asking us to find a way to provide that service. I know we have the money. I know we can find the money. So I think we should put our thinking caps on and our working caps and find a compromise so that we can have a walkable community, but the city pays for it. So I really want everyone to keep an open mind and take in all the public input and all our constituents who have asked us to look for solutions. Thank you.
In response to Commissioner Gillis's question about the change in when we did school routes, that was done in 2015 when we changed which school routes we do. And the decision really wasn't based on money. It was based on meetings we had with the school administrators, based on the changes that had been made to busing requirements and bus stops and pickups. And most of the changes that were implemented that year had it so that we only cleared one side of the street instead of both sides. So it really was about talking to the school administrators about the bus routes.
Can I have one more second? And another thing I have a problem with is if we decide to still keep doing the school routes and then have everybody else do their own. For instance, like Main Street. We do one side of Main Street. And the lucky people on the east side of Main Street, they'll have city tax dollars clearing their sidewalks. The unlucky people on the west side of Main Street, they'll have to do their own. Is that fair? Are we choosing which side we want and which ones we're going to accommodate on one side? We're going to clear your side here on this because you just happen to be the lucky ones on the east side of Main Street. Because currently we keep it cleared for the central students from downtown to CMU. So I have a hard time saying we're going to clear one side of a street and those people don't have to figure out what they're going to do on vacation or figure out how they're going to have the money. And then we're also requiring the residents that if it's icy, you have to go out and buy salt and sand to get rid of that ice. So not only if you aren't able to clear your own sidewalks and you have to hire someone, you might have to hire someone to also and pay them to put sand or salt on your sidewalks. I think it's just an extra added expense that the city can find a way to make happen.
Okay. Vice Mayor Mattei.
I'd be willing to consider postponing this as well. There's a number of things to, from this public hearing as well tonight and any other matters that might, come before us, in terms of further refining this ordinance. I think it's an opportunity to further, improve this as needed. But I would say, just in terms of the substance of the ordinance itself, I think by design, like this ordinance, from my take on the discussions that we've had, this by and large was seen as a package deal, that there would be in community support, in some form, to provide assistance to neighbors where needed or things of that nature. If assuming this ordinance was to have gone into effect, and however, there is the provision in there, for the delayed enforcement. So at the very least, if this were to have passed, I think that this would at least, get the ball moving in a direction that, up until this point, I think there's, certainly been a lot of discussion on this matter, but, I believe some action, to address this issue is, certainly appropriate, and in whatever form it takes, either, an ordinance that, can take into account all the, concerns as I'm concerned with in terms of the elderly or the disabled or the people who are, gone for a period of time, not to unduly burden them, but to also, provide, a service, to, benefit this community, to make sure that, we have a walkable system of sidewalks. So by postponing it, it's one more opportunity to further consider, possible alternatives.
Commissioner Lalonde.
We need clear sidewalks, period. And however we end up doing that is up for debate, and I'm open to hearing different opinions and different ideas on how to do that. Every single person I've talked to about this has either said, I already thought we had an ordinance because they clear their own sidewalks, or they say, yeah, we need that because I can't walk anywhere. Especially college students who are walking to class have a really hard time getting around when it's really slushy and nasty. So I think it's important for us to have clear sidewalks as a city. It's a benefit to the community, but I'm willing to hear different options as far as how we do that, so I would postpone.
Any other comments before we take a vote?
Question?
Okay, Commissioner Kulik.
When are we going to postpone it to?
I believe the 29th is what we have tentatively for a work session date, and then we can talk about it then to see where we are at. If that is what I'm hearing from. Okay. All right. I guess with that, I will say all those in favor of postponing say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, so we will postpone that. Keep your eye on the local paper so we know what happens at the next work session, and that should be on our special meeting at CMU. So if you want to come see our joint meeting and then come listen to the work session, you're welcome to do that. All right, back to the agenda. We are on to item number 14, consider closed session pursuant to subsections 8H of the Open Meetings Act for material exempt from discussion or disclosure by state and federal statute. I need a motion by Commissioner Kulik, seconded by Commissioner Joseph. Any comments or questions? Seeing none, I will ask the clerk to do a roll call vote.
Commissioner Gillis?
Aye.
Commissioner Joseph?
Aye.
Commissioner Kulik?
Aye.
Commissioner Lalonde?
Aye.
Commissioner Ling?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Maddie?
Aye.
Mayor Lentz?
Aye.
Motion passes.
Great, thank you. Any announcements on city-related issues and new business? Commissioner Kulik.
I assume we're going to be doing Halloween on Halloween again. And our designated city hours are from 6 until 8.
6 p.m. to 8 p.m. in the city.
Yes. And get ready for leaf pickup. That's coming up. And Nancy had those right at the tip of her tongue last meeting. And
We start encouraging people to rake the week of October 22nd, and our first pickup will be the week of October 29th, and every other week after that for 3 times.
Thank you.
And Pumpkin Promenade is downtown for younger children before the regular trick-or-treating hours. Anyone else? Commissioner Lalonde.
I was happy to see that the number of arrests over homecoming weekend was down, and I feel like this, coupled with welcome weekend also having great results, I feel like we're really moving in the right direction, and I'm happy that everyone who came to Mount Pleasant decided to do so safely, and our public safety officers, as well as CMU's public safety officers, were able to contain the merriment.
Great. Anyone else? Commissioner Gillis.
Just want to inform the public that we have an election coming up, and you can find information on candidates provided by the League of Women Voters at vote411.org. The candidates that have participated have answered some questions and given some background on themselves, so that's a great place to familiarize with your candidates. Also, you can register to vote still. Is that right?
Until tomorrow.
Until tomorrow?
The day tomorrow.
So you have one more day to get out there to the Secretary of State's and register to vote. And absentee ballots are available also. And you can contact our city clerk, Jeremy Howard, and set yourself up if you are going to be out of town, or you're a college student, or you have other difficulties making to the poll on November 6th. That's Tuesday, November 6th, so make sure you're out and about. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Commissioner Ling.
Just very quickly, a reminder that we are in the process of filling a lot of our openings on our boards and commissions. There was a notice in the paper, I think just within the last couple of days, it listed what all those various boards and commissions were. Plus, you can go to the city's website, and it lists both the openings that we have, and also you can apply for them online. So I would really encourage people to do that. I think that the deadline is right around the end of October for the receipt of
I want to say the 29th, I think.
For the receipt of those applications. And in relationship to the weekend, I echo Commissioner Lalonde's comments about the good work that's being done by the police department, and also wanted to just mention the note that we got from the city manager about the work done by the group called Greeks Clean the Street, which is a program that's been going on for a number of years that was originally begun by the late Jeff Pickler. They do a great job, and I drove through that area on my way from downtown, and it looked great. So I really appreciate the work that's done by the Greeks on this.
Not only has the police department done a great job, but really, part of the credit goes to CMU, and I actually had an opportunity to meet with new President Davies recently. We invited him to the 29th. I haven't gotten confirmation yet whether he'll be there or not, but when I talked to him, one of the things I wanted to emphasize was that we have those great partnerships that we've worked really hard for, setting community standards both on campus and off campus, and that working relationship and those expectations, and he agreed and kind of would like to continue those agreements and partnerships and move forward with that change in culture, if you will, that this is a family community, that, everyone is welcome here, but we have the same expectations here as we do in your hometown. So, wonderful. Any other announcements? With that, we will move to public comment. This is the opportunity to speak on anything on the agenda or anything city-related. We ask that you limit your comments to 5 minutes and state your name and address.
Thank you. My name is Sarah Spencer-Noggle, and I reside in Union Township. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I am running for Isabella County Probate Court Judge. Judge Urban is retiring after 30 years, I believe, on the bench, and I am running to replace him. The probate court is the court that hears cases that are very, very difficult and emotional. It's the place where people go in their most vulnerable moments. The probate court hears divorce cases, custody cases, child support cases involving vulnerable adults. Those are adults who have been abused or neglected. Cases involving guardianships of children. These are really some of the most difficult cases. I'm an attorney in Mount Pleasant. My office is right downtown and on Broadway, and I've devoted a large portion of my of my work to probate. It's difficult, it's emotional, it's the hardest job I have ever loved every single day of. I'm also our county's chief public defender, which means that I represent indigent people in court, in probate and in criminal court. I also oversee our public defender system. I supervise 8 attorneys and a $500,000 budget. Wearing these 2 hats as a private attorney and as a public defender, I've noticed that there are groups of people who tend to come in front of the court at higher rates than other groups, largely because they're the groups of people who tend to slip through the cracks, and they wind up in our court system as kind of a catch-all. These groups include veterans, children and adults with mental health issues, people who certainly deserve better, I think, from our community and from our court system. There are many social services obviously in place, but when people slip through the cracks, they end up in front of a judge, unfortunately, and for these groups, this isn't the best way, I think, to treat them. So what I'd like to do is start, for example, a veterans treatment program. They're sometimes called veterans treatment courts or structured veterans treatment programs. It's essentially a program put in place. They've got a few in counties around the state that have been very, very successful. Claire, you might have read in the Morning Sun, just got a big grant to start one of these programs. I'd like to do it. We have 3,500 veterans living in Isabella County, according to the VA, and between 5 and 10% come in front of the court every year, which is an astounding number. It's time to do something to lift them up and provide them the services, that they deserve. As for children and adults with mental health issues, our court is becoming the catch-all place for people with mental health issues because the state has disinvested in mental health. I think we're all pretty aware of that. So what I'd like to do is institute mental health courts for both of these groups of people. For children, we have a children's drug treatment court program that's been very, very successful. It was very innovative when it started. I'd like to tweak it to include kids with mental health issues. It's a small tweak that'll bring a big change and big results, I think, particularly in school safety, and it's something that we can do relatively quickly without a lot of additional taxpayer burdens. I'd also like to work toward an adult mental health court. There's grant funding available. It's a program I think that's very complicated and will take time to put in place, but it's something certainly I think that our court should consider. I think what I bring to the bench, if I'm elected, and what differentiates me from other candidates or other candidate now is the quality of experience that I've had. These cases, these divorce, custody, child support cases, these vulnerable adults, these child guardianship cases, these are cases that I have devoted my career to, and I'm the only candidate running for probate court judge who has experience in these areas of law. These are not easy cases, and there is no learning curve for these families who are, feeling the stress of divorce and disagreeing over custody of the children. There's no room for error in cases involving vulnerable adults. And I think it's safe to say that my first day on the bench, I'll be ready for each and every one of these cases because I've devoted my career to doing it. And so thank you very much for your time. I'm hoping that you'll consider voting for me on November 6th. As Commissioner Gillis pointed out, it's a big election. I think we're all about ready for it to happen. And thank you for your time.
Thank you. Is there anyone else here this evening who would like to give us any comments on anything city-related? Seeing none, I will close this portion of the meeting and we will recess. We have a work session discussion upstairs in conference room A on the 2019 operating budget, and then our closed session will be after that.